morning, good morning, good morning. Youth are going to leave us because they've heard me before. I get to speak in some amazing scenarios and situations through my life. I've tried to list in all the different places and different scenarios and the responses I get. I remember one, I love speaking at universities. I love the cut and thrust, the challenge of that environment. On this occasion, I'd preached my heart out and thought I did a good job. And then suddenly this student came up to me with his finger pointing at me. And he said, "What has God ever done for me?" And with that, he left, which was sad because I've got an answer for him. And I thought you might like to listen to it this morning. I think it will prepare you for this week and what God has done for us and what we can revel in. Because if he just stayed for getting an answer, I would have taken him to Good Friday. There is no better place to go to discover what God has done for us. The drama began long before they pierced his hands with those nails and those nails into their feet. First, they flogged him. The worst execution on the planet was not enough for Jesus. Beforehand, they were to flog him. A legionnaire would have a whip. It would be made of many leather strands, and in that leather was bone and rifle shot or bullet sort of stones. Lead, that's what I'm looking for. Lead balls in the whip, and they would use it upon a prisoner's back. They would rip the skin off Jesus' back, sometimes even showing the internal organs. It was brutal. That Jesus survived 39 lashes was remarkable, a miracle in itself. They were fixed on just one thing. It was to humiliate the prisoner and to put him in his place. But flogging wasn't enough. The scriptures tell us that at that moment in time when they finished flogging him, they began to spit on him. See, humiliation was their game. And spitting didn't affect the body, but it denigrated the spirit and the soul. They had this purpose in mind. They were elevating themselves at the expense of another. They were feeling big by making someone small. What they never realized that Jesus had the same purpose and the same goal. He came to elevate man, but not at the expense of another, but at the expense of himself. He surrendered to such indignity so that we could be elevated and lifted high. What has God ever done for me? After the flogging, after the spitting came, as you may well know, the crown of thorns. In its day, the significance of such an act would not have gone unnoticed. See, thorns or brambles had huge significance in that day. See, they knew that the consequences of our sin was brambles and thorns. And if we were ever to be redeemed and set free, then the brambles had to be faced and the thorns had to be worn. See, it says that when Adam and Eve sinned, it had impacted upon the whole of creation. And thistles and thorns began to grow, and weeds began to take root. Wow. The brambles had to be faced. Otherwise, man could never be free from his sin and the consequences of his sin. Let me try to illustrate that. Let me put it like this. One day, Jesus sat in all his glory and all his honor. For his love for us, chose to remove his crown of glory and honor and lay it down, and instead to pick up the crown of thorns and to wear it on his head. See, if man was to be all he was intended to be, the brambles had to be dealt with. And Jesus bore them so that this truth could be your living reality. So that you could take off the crown that you wear, the sin and shame, and lay it down. And instead, you could be crowned with glory and honor. What has God ever done for me? Then in that story, there's the robe. See, we know very little about what Jesus looked like and what he wore. We know a lot about John the Baptist and what he wore. We know a lot about the Pharisees and what they wore. But nothing about Jesus. This is what somebody said. What is describing his clothes, neither so humble as to touch the hearts, nor so glamorous as to turn heads. But we do discover one thing about Jesus' robe. It was seamless. Jesus wore a robe of seamless perfection. Wow. The disciples who knew him best said they found no guile, no guilt in Jesus. Nothing did he do wrong. One day Jesus was in front of this hostile crowd and he asked them a question. Does anybody accuse me of anything? And the crowd was silent. See, there's no one like Jesus. No one has walked this earth perfect, seamless. But the robe was taken from him, and he took on such indignity, a wardrobe of indignity. He puts on a wardrobe of nakedness and shame. Why? So that you and I get to wear a robe of seamless perfection. The story goes that they gambled for such a robe. Mankind has been gambling over seamless perfection all his days and never winning. You can never win, you can never earn it, you can never deserve it, but you can receive it. The free gift of God. seamless perfection, clothed and dressed in his righteousness. What has God ever done for me? Then there was the myrrh, strange substance that they decided to give to Jesus both at the beginning of the crucifixion and then during the crucifixion. But it says that he refused such a drink. He was no stranger to myrrh. It had haunted him from his childhood. See, when the wise men came to visit him, they left gifts, and one of those gifts was myrrh. And what does myrrh speak of? It speaks of death, the end, the final chapter. Jesus knew that he'd come for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to die. To die in your place so that you would never have to. But it says that he did not drink of the myrrh. He refused it. It was probably the only compassionate act in the whole of the story of Good Friday. Because he was given it as a drug to dull the pain. To make it a little bit more palatable what they were doing to him. But Jesus did not choose to drink it. See, we have a king who knows about all that we suffer. All the pain and anguish that life throws at us because he chose to face it full on without drugs. So that we know we have a king who understands us. He endures all our pains and all our heartaches. He's declaring once and for all, he fully understands and he has fully felt. You can come to him and he knows. He knows. What has God ever done for me? Then there's that strange detail of that sign that was put above the cross of Jesus. Pilate insisted on it being there. What's more, of all the four Gospels, they all record this detail, whereas most of the other details, only some refer to. Why is it so important? What does it speak of? This sign that said in 3 languages that Jesus was the King of the Jews, the Messiah, the one who was foretold and the world was waiting for. I think it says many things, but let me just offer this. It speaks that our God is the greatest communicator that there ever is and ever will be. First of all, God can use absolutely anybody, should he will. Even Pilate is a puppet in his hands. And Pilate insists that this sign is nailed to the tree. God can use Pilate to speak truth to us. That Jesus is who he claimed to be. God himself, incarnate, sacrificing his life, demonstrating his deep affection for us. But the sign was in 3 languages: Hebrew, Latin, Greek. Hebrew was the language of the people of Israel, the language of religion. If you speak the language of religion, if you are a religious, spiritual person, you need to know God speaks your language and can get through to you. But it was written in Latin, the language of the Romans, the language of law, the language of reason and logic. If you are of that mind, you need evidence, then God speaks your language. Finally, it was in Greek, the language of that day's culture, the everyday language. We may be just everyday people, and God speaks our language. There is no one he cannot get through to. There is no one's language he doesn't speak. What has God ever done for me? I don't know if you've ever asked this question. Why were there just 3 crosses? Why was Jesus in the middle with a thief on either side? See, normally the Romans would crucify people in their tens, sometimes even in their hundreds. But on this occasion, there's only 3. And Jesus is in the middle. Either side are 2 thieves who have been found guilty of the same crimes, who are now facing the same judgment and punishment. These 2 thieves are facing the same hostile crowd. And they're either side of Jesus. Why? Both start abusing Jesus. They join in with the crowd and hurl verbal abuse at Jesus. They both start hostile to Christ. But the story changes dramatically for one. Because suddenly one gets a revelation of who Jesus really is and speaks to him, longing to be with him forever. I find that remarkable. How many wrong things had that thief done in his life? How many bad decisions? Too many to mention. And yet one moment in history, he makes one decision which rights all the others. Can you imagine that? One decision that puts right all your wrong decisions. So one thief ends up with Jesus in paradise while the other faces eternal punishment. Why 3 crosses? Why Jesus in the middle? Can I suggest it might be this reason? That God gives us the dignity of choice. Because that's what we see, isn't it? Choices being made that Jesus gives dignity to. It's interesting that he's totally silent to the thief who rejects him. See, sometimes he sends thunder. And sometimes he's just silent. Silent because he gives us the dignity of choice. And why 2 thieves? Could it be that there's only 2 choices that we could ever make? We are either for him or against him. We either acknowledge him as King of Kings or we reject him and despise him. What has God ever done for me? Matthew records a strange phenomenon that takes place just as Jesus breathes his last breath. He says from 12 noon to 3 p.m. darkness fell. Deep darkness fell. Dr. Barnhouse was facing the worst day of his life. He had just buried his wife and he was driving home from the funeral with his children in the back. And he was trying to bring hope and comfort to them at this desperate time. He just didn't know what to do. And he was saying to God, God, help me. How do I bring any sense to this? As he prayed that prayer, this huge lorry drove past him, overtook him. And a huge shadow from the lorry fell on the car. And then suddenly he got revelation. He said, children, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to be run over by a juggernaut of a lorry or by its shadow? And the children obviously answered, the shadow, Daddy, the shadow. And their loving father said this, Jesus took the juggernaut of death so that we would only have to ever face its shadow. Wow. See, the tomb is empty. The grave clothes have been left because he has no need of them anymore. He's risen. He took the full force of the juggernaut of death so that we would only ever have to face its shadow. What has God ever done for me? It was the day before Passover. For the Jewish people, that was the most significant day in their diary. It was the day they would remember the greatest moment in their lives when once they were slaves, became free. Protected from the angel of death by blood on their doorposts. And now the shadow of that was being worked out in reality in the person of Jesus Christ. They wanted to end this all before Passover, so they wanted to kill these three who were being crucified. They would break their legs, they would suffocate and die very quickly. But to fulfill prophecy, they never broke a bone in Jesus' body. Instead, they thrust a spear in his side. But he was already dead. John records an unusual phenomena that they would not have known the significance of. It was centuries later that the medical world discovered this. But blood and water flowed from his side. Because when you're dead, the particles of your blood separate. Jesus was already dead. That's significant. Because people have argued Jesus never really died on the cross. He was just, he just passed out and was resuscitated in the cool of a tomb. No, he was dead. The evidence was there. But it was more than that. Blood and water flowed from his side. See, we need eternal forgiveness and cleansing. And God gave his blood for that. But if you had those bad days, when you need cleansing. When you've just messed up and it's all gone horribly wrong. You know you're saved, but boy, you are a million miles from being sanctified. You need water to wash you, as well as the blood to cleanse you. And Jesus provides for it all in his body on the tree. What has God ever done for me? And then there's that strange final phenomenon. In fact, we sang about it brilliantly in the first song. When Jesus said it was finished, those in the temple would have been horrified by what just had taken place. Because as those words echoed out, the huge temple curtain was ripped from top to bottom, torn apart. The violence of that was incomprehensible. Why? Let me try to explain what that curtain represented, what it meant. It could have been a concrete wall, or an electrified fence, or a heavily guarded barricade. What it said was this far and no further. You see, on one side of the curtain stood sinful man. On the other side was a holy God. And never the twain can meet. Some had tried, it had ended in disaster. But now, God, by his own initiative, grabs hold of it from the top and tears it to shreds. He didn't just part it so it could be drawn back again. He tore it to shreds so it could never be replaced. Wow. See, God made us for intimate relationship with him. And he made it possible through the cross. And the barrier that was between us had to be once and for all destroyed, torn to shreds, so that we can boldly come into his presence. Why did he tear the curtain? Because his heart was already torn. And that's why he came. And that's why he died. I will never forget that student. What has God ever done for me? I just hope that in his life he's heard an answer to that question. The joy is you have. And as I said about the crosses, there is a choice to make. We're either for him or against him. Band, will you come and join me? I think we need to worship. And then I just want to give you an opportunity to anyone here. I know many of you, most of you are Christians. But some of you have wandered far from God recently, and it's time to come home. And I know there's one person here at least who've never ever made that decision to choose Christ. I want to give you that opportunity to do that this morning. And for all you believers, I hope what today has done is stir you and provoke you concerning the wonder of the season that we're now entering into and all that he's accomplished for us. Let's stand.